Welcome to my channel, Rise of Edge Crusher. I'm an Overwatch coach with a focus on helping Bronze and Silver players learn the skills they'll need to rank out of Bronze and Silver, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Seita Scrim lobby code. This is a tool which is helpful to coaches at the highest level of play, such as Contenders and Overwatch League, but teaches bad habits to the lower ranked players. Not just Bronze and Silver players either. In my opinion, using the preset does more harm than good for any team ranked Masters and below. First, I'm going to talk about what the Seita Scrim code is and what it does, then explain why I believe it teaches bad habits to organized Overwatch players ranked Masters and below. After that, I'll explain what the intended purpose of the code was and why it's helpful to teams at the highest levels of play. For any viewers who are new to the game and aren't familiar with organized play or scrims, I'll briefly explain what a scrim is. It's a custom game played between two pre-organized teams using the competitive rule set to practice their skill and coordination as a team. In a scrim, each team wants to practice attacking and defending the full map. So if the first attacking team doesn't complete the entire map, the map will be reset to allow both teams to practice attack and defense for the entire map. Seita Scrim is an Overwatch workshop game mode used to preset a lobby to host a scrim. The most popular feature of this workshop mode is that it eliminates the need to reset the map by allowing the payload to move past the destination marker set by the first attacking team, if that destination marker is short of the final checkpoint. It also allows either team to add time to the beginning stage, in which the attackers wait and spawn while the defenders get set up, or both teams to mark themselves as ready during that same stage to open the attacker's spawn doors and begin the game within 5 seconds. It allows defenders, before the game has started, to melee while in their spawn and be teleported immediately to the first checkpoint to set up. It displays several player stats to any coaches and analysts who might be spectating the game, including damage dealt, damage taken, deaths, and healing dealt. Sounds incredibly convenient, right? Unfortunately, there are some ways in which it teaches bad habits to lower ranked players. The most notable is that players are granted extra time in which to choose their team compositions. Since the Seita Scrim preset became popular, I've seen many teams add extra setup time to the clock, using it to discuss their team comp or make changes to their team comp. This is a terrible habit to be getting into. If you're learning how to play the game together as a team, your strategic shot caller needs to know their teammates' hero pools, be able to put a comp together, call it, and have your team out the spawn door within the default allowed time. In a tournament, you won't have a fancy preset to take all the extra time you need to discuss your team comp and spawn. If you can't choose your heroes and get set up within the default time allowed by a standard match, then you need to practice that. I've also seen plenty of players who don't add any extra time to the clock, but they do take extra time to discuss and choose their team comp, knowing that the feature by which they melee to arrive at the first checkpoint will allow them to get set up in time. Though less extreme, this is still a bad habit to get into, for the same reason explained before. In a tournament, you will need to choose your heroes, get out of spawn, walk to the checkpoint, and set up within the default time allowed by the game. You won't have the option of taking your time, then pressing melee to teleport to the first checkpoint. And here's the next problem. Seita Scrim removes the meter count from the bar at the top of the HUD, which shows the payload's progress once the first round has been played. It also removes the indicators that mark the locations of the first and second checkpoints. In the short term, this gives a small strategic advantage to the team who defends in the first round, as they will have that information available, and the team defending second will not. In the long run, though, it will unconsciously train teams who use it to stop looking for that information, making them more susceptible to C9ing the point. And then there's the stats that it so conveniently displays for the spectators. I often hear from my lower ranked players that I work with that their coaches love the Seita Scrim code because it allows them to look at the player stats and identify exactly what's going wrong in the team fight. If these players were at Grandmaster level, I would absolutely agree. In lower ranks, especially Platinum and below, player stats are largely irrelevant to coaching, and a coach who relies on them is likely not going to give the player any helpful information. Let's say a coach is working with a Gold McCree main who'd like to get to Plat. The coach notices on the Gold McCree's weapon accuracy that it's hovering around 30%, 35%, so the coach says, "I'd like you to work on your aim and try to get that number up. It should be around 50%. Well, what happens then is, the McCree is always going to be watching that number. He no longer goes for the shots that will be harder to hit because he knows he's going to miss those anyway. Instead, he takes safe, cautious positioning, he shoots at the large hitboxes, the easy targets, tanks, enemies that are just in his ideal range and already being pressured by another teammate anyway, so there's no pressure being put on him, and his weapon accuracy jumps straight up, and he thinks he's improved this huge amount in a short time. But in reality, by doing that, by changing his playstyle in that way, he's never going to learn how to land those harder shots because he stopped trying for them. That's not going to help him get to plat. And I've worked with a lot of lower ranked players who had coaches like this. It would end up with the coach saying, "I don't know what to tell you, you're improving, you should be climbing." And meanwhile, the player feels out of control. Like, no matter what they do, no matter how much they're improving, they're just not reaching the next rank, and they feel like they can't reach this next rank, and they don't know why. They don't know what's going wrong. I firmly believe that coaches who need statistics to evaluate a player don't have a good understanding of how to coach. Instead of focusing on numbers, a coach should focus on the player as an individual. What do they want to get out of the game? What do they enjoy doing? Do they like controlling the pace of the game? Getting a lot of glorious kills? Enabling their teammates? Do they like making fast-paced decisions? Or would they rather move through the team fight at a slower pace? Once you've identified that, the coach should be identifying the player's weaknesses. Maybe they're out of position a lot, or they have a bad sense of how much space their team is controlling at any given time. The coach should then guide the player to correct those weaknesses in a way that builds towards doing that thing that they enjoy the most about the game. Coaches who focus exclusively on stats will not help lower-ranked players reach their goals, and will often take the fun of the game away from them and turn it into a frustrating chore and a frustrating experience. For these reasons, I recommend that lower-ranked teams not use the Seita Scrim preset, and instead use a basic competitive rule set game with all 3 maps of a control point enabled and kill cams disabled. Resetting the map takes 5 seconds at most, and is a tiny inconvenience in comparison to the negative effects on your team's tournament performance from becoming too comfortable with the Seita Scrim preset. But I do think the Seita Scrim preset is good for teams at like Overwatch League or Contenders level of play, which is what it was intended for. And I am going to explain now why the Seita Scrim preset is helpful to that level of play. Coaching is very different at the highest levels of play. Every player in Contenders or in Overwatch League already understands how to aim, already understands how to position, and how a team fight is supposed to go. Coaches at those ranks don't have to teach players to stand at corners or line up their crosshair at head height where an enemy will peek. Instead, coaching is focused on helping players identify ways that they can each use their individual strengths to best enable each other in the team fight. Part of this involves determining exact moments in which your team was put at a disadvantage and what little thing led up to it. For example, let's say that a team is staging a dive, and they're waiting for the enemy team to walk around the corner. This is a team at a very high level play. Everyone correctly positioned, coordinated, all converging on the enemy team at the same time. But before they can get that member of the enemy team isolated, their Winston is dead, and then they're forced to disengage. Here, the player stats displayed to the spectators by the Seita Scrim preset can actually help the coaches. By looking at the damage done and damage taken statistics, the coach identifies the exact moment at which the Winston player took a massive burst of damage during the dive. The coach can also identify which player or players on the enemy team put that damage into the Winston. Now the coach can tell the Winston and D.Va exactly what angle they need to be mindful of, at what precise timing during the engage, what to watch out for, what went wrong, exactly, down to the second. At such a high level of play, those statistics become relevant because all major problems like positioning and coordinating an engage have already been solved. Those players are also well aware of what team comp they're planning to run. They use the features of the Seita Scrim code to start the game sooner, not to give themselves extra time to prepare. They efficiently select their team comp, set up, and are ready their team to begin the game in under 30 seconds, allowing the most possible time to practice. That concludes this video on the Seita Scrim preset, why it's popular at the highest levels of play, and why it teaches bad habits to the lower levels. I hope you found this video helpful. Please feel free to leave any feedback you have for me in the comments below. Good luck in all your Overwatch conquests.